This program was made possible by grants from the John and Diane Laxmi Family Charitable Fund, the Asfar and Maheen Malik Family Foundation, and the Missouri Asian American Youth Foundation.
Anytime you're bringing two sets of values, two sets of cultures, any of that together, it is going to bring up discussion, conflict, tension.
Hi, I'm Aisha Sultan, and these are things we don't talk about. Sophia is a 24-year-old college graduate. She began dating Marcus, a 26-year-old artist, last year. Sophia comes from a traditional and conservative family that values educational and professional achievements highly. Her parents envisioned her marrying someone with a stable career and similar background. Marcus, even though he's very talented, does not have a conventional job or steady income. He comes from a different cultural background. This further fuels Sophia's parents' disapproval. They express concerns about his financial instability and these cultural differences. Despite her parents' objections, Sophia is deeply in love with Marcus. She feels that her parents are unfairly judging him. The situation has created significant tension at home. There's been frequent arguments. Sophia feels torn between her love for Marcus and her desire to please her parents. She also feels like she's living two separate lives. I'm joined by psychologist Dr. Neha Navsaria and Alex Davis, a psychiatric nurse practitioner, to get insight on Sophia's hypothetical situation. So how common are situations like this, and have you experienced anything like this in your practices?
It's very common. I mean, I think anytime you're bringing two sets of values, two sets of cultures, any of that together, it is going to bring up discussion, conflict, tension, and then especially with the cultural layer, when you have a lot of cultures that involve a lot of the family and sort of the sense of the group and the community, then these things are going to come up and sort of add to that tension as well.
Alex, how have you seen that manifest in your cases?
Yeah, I agree. I've seen it a lot in my practice where there's a lot of relationship concerns that maybe parents have regarding their children. And it sometimes isn't always regarding cultural. It sometimes might be related to other things, but it's something that is very, very common.
Okay, so let's say the family at an impasse. When does it make sense to try to come in and talk to someone about this?
Well, exactly at that point, because if you're at an impasse, it means that communication is difficult and that you need somebody in an objective viewpoint, somebody who can kind of help guide and direct traffic around that conversation.
Alex, what is some language that someone can use to try to draw their parents in, or language that parents could use to try to draw their child into a situation where a neutral party is kind of helping navigate this conflict?
Yeah, possibly making it a fun experience, or being like, hey, can we discuss this with, a religious, leader in our faith? That can be a fantastic informal way of kind of broaching a topic in a safe environment.
Sometimes a religious leader might have values that are in conflict with the people that are involved. Like perhaps the children have a different interpretation of some religious edict as opposed to how their parents see it. How do you navigate a situation like that? Is it just going to lead to estrangement?
Well, it's, I think, very important that everybody go into this all being on the same page and all in agreement as to like who this person is that they could bring to talk to them about.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Like both set of people have to say, okay, this person feels like someone who will understand my point of view.
Yes.
Because sometimes parents don't want to bring in a third party if they feel like they're just going to side with the kid and they're not going to hear me.
Yeah. And you want it to create a really good foundation to go into that conversation, because everybody's going in knowing that, well, it's going to end up this way. It's kind of like people already predict what's going to happen.
Right.
So you want to make sure that everybody's in agreement and you have a good foundation to start the conversation off with.
Alex, what do you feel like is really at the root of this conflict?
I think a lot of times the root of this kind of conflict is a fear of the parent, fear of possibly this partner that their child is seeing might be at risk of hurting them in some way, whether it be them not talking to parent anymore or possibly being put in dangerous ways. So I think a lot of times it's fear.
Right, and maybe fear of losing your cultural background, your heritage, things that are important to you, your religious background, or perhaps your future grandkids won't share those things in common with you, or that your child's future partner won't be able to take care of them the way that you would want them to be taken care of. Are these concerns that you hear, and how do you address them?
Yeah, no, those concerns come up often. It's this general idea of loss, and it's really important to sort of unpack that with a family, and it's loss. It could be loss on both ends as well. So it's really important for parents to discuss that in front of their children, and then for young adult children to discuss that with their parents too, because sometimes a lot of assumptions can be made about what each other's thinking. And if you have somebody helping guide that conversation, it might be that everybody actually is feeling worried about the same thing, but not really talking about it as much.
Alex, how do you tend to see these situations resolving?
Yeah, they can resolve in many different ways. I feel that some of the most successful ways that they have been addressed is by the parents being more receptive to the partner coming around maybe family events or faith events, getting to know that partner. So when they begin to understand and know their partner with their child and see the love and happiness that their child is experiencing, a lot of times that is when these impasses are passed.
Can it make a difference when there's a grandchild involved? How do you feel like that might affect a parent's willingness to engage with a couple they might not have initially approved of?
I mean, again, I think that idea of like, what are we going to be teaching the grandchild about culture? And I think those things always come up and are always in parents sort of in the back of their mind. So it does definitely, I wouldn't say it changes it, but it's another factor at play.
And sometimes it can affect their level of willingness to engage with the situation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Right? And so I do wonder if you just let it simmer and you just decide, I'm just going to try to wait it out and live this double life and I'm going to try to avoid this conflict. What are some consequences of handling it that way?
Well, sort of the key word is a double life. That's an exhausting life to lead, sort of when you're trying to figure out when you're kind of your identity here in this setting and then your identity here in that setting. And that's how a lot of individuals have learned to cope over time. But over time, that can drain you. It can be exhausting. And then, like we were just talking about, when children are in the picture, then how do you parent around that sort of double life? Like, you want something to be cohesive, because when children have that sort of cohesive, unified environment, then that's also better for their social and emotional well-being.
Right. What do you think, Alex? Do you think that there can be a real toll, a psychological or physical toll, of feeling like you have to live a double life?
Oh, yes, most definitely. Just the amount of strain that can put on the partner of the relationship. So maybe the partner doesn't feel as comfortable coming around the family events, and that only maybe makes the conflict larger. So I'd say just a strain on the relationship, it can be very distressing, especially if it's not addressed.
So there are some cultures and religious backgrounds in which dating is really frowned upon, or not having your parents involved from the beginning is really frowned upon. So let's say there's somebody in a situation where they have found a partner on their own, potential partner. They are pretty sure it's someone their parents not going to approve of, and they have no idea how to bring this up or even broach the topic. What kind of words would you tell them to try to use to have that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would just empathize with them that this is something that is difficult to bring up, and it's okay to feel that way, given what you just described. It is important to see if there's like another trusted family member, someone in the community, another maybe trusted friend of the parent that the child is also close to, that they can pull in for the conversation. So it's not just a one-on-one battle. I think it's also important for the child going into this conversation to know that it's not all going to be resolved in one conversation.
That's such an important point. That's such an important point, is that you finally build up the courage to say, okay, I found this person, I'd like you to get to know them. And you might not get an immediate sort of, okay, fine. Alex, can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, relationships are dynamic and they're constantly changing. And it can be hard, especially if coming from a different background and maybe not being as accepting of this new partner. It's gonna take some time for both parties to really connect.
What would you tell a client who came to you who says, I don't know how to have this conversation? What kind of suggestions might you make?
Yeah, I would start to discuss with them kind of their relationship with their parents, and maybe even explore maybe the parents' relationship with grandparents. Is this something that is kind of a habit in the family? And kind of exploring that relationship with the parent will allow them to feel more empowered to talk with them and then approach that topic.
What would you say?
Well, I think, again, that piece of time is really important to sort of set some expectations for the child going into the conversation that, your parents are just learning about this now. So let's think about ways that they can get to know this person, and think about ways that, you can have some ongoing conversation so that everybody can slowly digest all of this, because it's a change. It's a huge change for any family. And I think for families where they haven't been part of that relationship building early on, it's harder.
One of the fastest growing demographics in this country are interfaith, intercultural, and interracial relationships and marriages, right? Do you think because of that we're seeing more acceptance or more conflict around this?
I think there's definitely more acceptance we're seeing in terms of like how things are talked about in the community. I think something that would be helpful is, I think, if more of these couples are talking about sort of the successes, like what's working. Because I think early on when this was very new, it was very easy to say this isn't going to work out. And it's because nobody had the success data points to work from. But I think that's something I'm very curious about, of just hearing how couples have made it work, because there's no one right path to do it either.
That's a really good point. There's 100 ways in which families can be healthy and partnerships can be great together. Alex, do you think that we're getting to a place of greater acceptance?
I do, and I think a lot of that has to do with social media as well. With social media, we're able to connect more with communities and similar-minded people and find interventions that have worked well for others. So I think that with the explosion of technology and just connection, it can only help in those situations.
I think it's also helped people's exposure to other cultures. And so now it might not feel as foreign or as scary if someone is very different than your family or comes from a different background. Do you feel as though that's been a way that's sort of eased the conflict around these issues?
Yeah, I think, again, that social media exposure, I mean, whether it's talking about relationships or even just what other kids hear about, like what their classmates' backgrounds and cultures are, like more children are aware of these things. So that's then kind of building up into how they're understanding and learning about other people around them. And then it impacts how they enter relationships.
Right. Like, these are the most diverse generations that have ever lived in America because, this is very natural to them. And I think some older generations are still adapting and trying to wrap their mind around how it can change the family dynamic, but also enrich family dynamics, right? So what about situations in which a parent or someone in the community has seen a relationship or a marriage fall apart, and they're able to just blame it and say, oh, well, you see, they married so-and-so out of the culture, out of the religion, and look at the disaster that happened. How do you respond?
Well, I think it's really important to highlight the piece that for any relationship, there are a number of factors that can go into that relationship not working out well. And this is just true for any relationship. It's not just to say that there's a single factor, that this is because that there were two cultures or two faiths. And because then again, there's also the success stories as well. So it's really important to, it's like an iceberg. Like, you're looking at the top, which is, whether it failed or succeeded, but then what were all the factors below that led up to it? And it's important to have those conversations.
What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, and with social media as well, sometimes we get to see like all the failures, unfortunately, sometimes too. And if a parent is kind of looking at a situation, especially with a partner, and maybe not feeling super comfortable, they might be more gravitating towards those negative stories.
Right. Like, you kind of are looking for evidence to bolster your argument, and you're kind of ignoring the things that don't support your argument. And I think that's natural.
Yeah,
we all do that, right?
Yeah.
And we want to bring our best argument and make our best case in front of people. Now, what are things that you wish communities would talk about more in regards to this type of conflict that might make it easier and better for everyone?
I think, as we said before, like the success stories,
Okay.
like why, because it's so easy to focus on the things that are negative, but you have many, many couples that could be sitting right there, many families right there who are just such good examples of how they work together to make it work, and really talking about that process and even calling it a process, that it takes effort to make a relationship work. It takes effort to make a family work well with healthy communication. And I think sometimes we think, oh, it's very easy to do, and that person's not doing it, and that person's
Right.
not doing it.
Right.
But it's a team effort, and I think we need to be making that conversation more normal, that we're having those conversations.
Yeah, and I would expand off that. Families, people are living older and older now, and
Right.
so we're having great grandparents and great grandchildren in the same house. So 4 or 5 generations in the same house. So making sure that communication is good amongst the family as well. There's sometimes younger demographics are going to be more texting, more sending messages,
Right.
and there could be a lot of miscommunication, misunderstandings there. So just having better communication within the household across generations.
And don't you think there's also something to be said for just expanding our own tolerance for difference? I mean, I think we sort of have this natural tendency to gravitate towards what's comfortable and familiar for us. So can you talk a little bit about how we can each individually expand our tolerance for something different?
Well, I think it's first important just for yourself to sort of tell yourself that this is different to me, and I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable.
It's okay to say that?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It's completely okay to say that. First, you have to start with yourself.
Yeah.
To be able to, because that's going to again give you a foundation to then make those next steps to manage whatever situation it is that you're trying to figure out. So it's important for somebody to understand like where they stand and what it is about their perspective and viewpoint that's either helping or maybe not helping the situation. And then it's thinking about next steps with the, how you want to engage that conversation with the next person.
Okay.
Yeah. And to expand off of that, as we kind of explore kind of our own feelings, and we maybe don't feel okay with a certain ideal, we start feeling a little nervous, explore why am I feeling that way? Have I always felt that way? Is that something new? Is that only happened recently? And sometimes that can be really, really informative.
So this might be a controversial question, but let's say I don't want to use my own example because I'm not in the situation yet, but let's say a parent is uncomfortable with somebody that their child is dating or has said that I want to marry this person. Are you saying that the parent should start with themselves and ask, why am I uncomfortable with this?
That it is a good place to start. It seems odd for the parent because it's like they want to start with their child, especially with the dynamics that have occurred. But it's also going to help the parent figure out how they actually want to convey what they want to convey to the child. So it's kind of like that's the rehearsal.
Okay.
Of why is it, like what you said, sort of really thinking about what is it about this that makes me uncomfortable? Is there something in our own family history, or is there something in our community that's causing me to think this way?
So what's a nicer way or a better, less toxic way to say, I don't think they're good enough for you?
They might say something that, well, have you talked to somebody else, or have you reached out to so-and-so's daughter or son, or just kind of these little comments sometimes that can seem very passive and not very aggressive, but they add up over time that, I can understand that you're maybe not happy with my situation.
And also just exploring, having a conversation with sort of what are the strengths in your relationships? What you think are the things that aren't going so great in the
that's
relationships?
a really great question to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I don't use the word weakness in the relationship because that could sometimes be a triggering thing.
A defensive response.
Yeah, that you're going to get a defensive response, or it looks like you're trying to pull that information out.
Right.
So often a phrase I might use is like, what do you think are the things that you're worried about or that aren't going so great? Have you guys talked through those things?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and what's another way to say, what are people going to say about this? We're going to be humiliated by your behavior. Or should you just keep that to yourself?
I was just going to say that I think there's a time for that part of it. I think so much of it is first looking at the individual and then their immediate relationship.
Okay.
And then there might be a time to talk about the family, the community. Because if you don't focus on the individual, then it's going to come off as you're like, mom, dad, you're only worried about what the community thinks. Are you thinking about what I'm thinking? And if you haven't had that conversation individually with your child, then that kind of proves the child's point.
Right. That maybe you are just worried about what everybody else thinks and not really our happiness. Are there situations in which parents see their child's relationship as an extension or validation of their parenting?
Yes, because so much of, especially like if you look at some communities like the Asian American community, so much of their parenting identity is around what they instill in their child about their own identity and their own decision making.
Interesting.
And it's different from maybe other cultures where it's more granting a child a lot of autonomy about their decision making.
Right.
And it's important to understand like where the parents are coming from. Like this is how they understand their identity of being a parent. So it's not like, they're getting up every morning and thinking, how am I going to control my child today? Right. It's coming from a place where these are sort of the models that they follow, the values that they follow. But we do want to put all of that out there to then discuss, okay, how is this impacting the current situation?
So let me give you a situation. There are some immigrant families in which they might have just met on their wedding day because they had a more arranged marriage set up, or the families were very involved in selecting a partner, and now their child is coming to them with someone who they didn't even know perhaps before because things were happening behind their back. That's a dramatic change just within one generation, right?
Yeah.
And so should the child have the adult child have some understanding for what the parents are going through?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times I ask a lot of the younger generation to really pause and step back and think about their parents' experience, and not in a way to say that, okay, so what you guys have to worry about, you shouldn't bother worrying about this, but more so they can really understand why their parents are thinking about things and why they're approaching them that way. Because it just helps the tension in the conversation. And it's important for a child, an adult child, to then verbalize to the parent that they sort of see them and they hear them as well. Because when both sides are hearing and seeing each other, then you can get a good, healthy conversation going.
And for an adult child, to have a parent reject your partner, does that feel like a rejection of yourself?
I would say most would say yes, because that's someone that they've chosen to be their partner. So that is, if a parent were to reject that or not approve of that, it's disapproving of their decisions.
Right. And so it's very personal. Yeah. It's like fraught with so much more than this is who I want to be with or this is who I want to marry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's really questioning, like, to the parent, like, do you have confidence in me to live as an adult? That's what it feels like. But I think parents don't realize that that's what it comes off as.
Right. That you're questioning, right, their confidence, their competency, their decision-making, all of that. That's really fascinating. Now, do you have any advice or tips for families who might be in similar situations? Or if they're estranged, like a conflict happened, they never approved, and now they're just not in contact anymore. What can be done?
Well, I think just in general, it's important to start these conversations early and keeping that open communication early. So even if you are uncomfortable as a parent about the things that your child might be telling you about whatever it is, relationships with friends, trends that are going on, if children don't feel comfortable telling you, then slowly over time, especially as they get older, they're not going to bring these things, and then that gap is going to increase related to communication.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say that if there's a partner that, families feel they don't feel as comfortable around, I would suggest just making sure that there's real definitive boundaries when communicating.
Can you speak more about boundaries?
Yeah, so with boundaries, if we feel that uncomfortable with, son-in-law coming around, a certain kind of event, saying, is it okay if they stay home, or can we spend time from 1 to 3 p.m.? Making those specific time slots can make it a lot easier for both parties.
Right, because then you also know exactly what you're in for. It's not some indefinite amount of time. There's some, like you said, there's boundaries in place for that. Sometimes people are reluctant to bring in an outsider because they feel like they're not going to understand. or they're going to be judged, or their family will be judged, or parents feel like they're just going to take my kid's side. So when you're looking for someone to talk to, how important is it to find someone who shares either a cultural background or has some cultural competency around these issues?
So it is very important. I think even before that step, it still varies with a lot of people within one culture, because for some people, they do want to see somebody who has that understanding. And then for some people, it's too close to home. And so it first is important for everybody to be on the same page of who they want to see. If they do want to see somebody of their background or somebody who has that cultural competency, then it is important to look for that, because that comes up. And I think for some families, it's a really important thing. They want to feel that trust in the setting. That trust is such an important piece of being able to do good therapy and to have a good therapeutic relationship. And when you have a good therapeutic relationship, then the opportunity for change is even greater.
Right. Alex, how do you convince people that you're just not going to take a side and make the other person feel like they're wrong for their attitude?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say, again, trust is huge when it comes to the therapeutic relationship. And one thing I also want to say is when it comes to seeing a counselor, seeing someone that is a mediator of some sort, making sure that it is not a surprise. Because in my own practice, I have had many clients bring in, a significant other or a family member that was not aware of what was going to be happening. And that can really backfire and the person can feel attacked. So that's something that I do want to mention.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much for coming by to talk about this issue. It's something that we all need to talk more about.
The root of this kind of conflict is a fear of the parent, a fear of possibly this partner that their child is seeing might be at risk of hurting them in some way, whether it be them not talking to parent anymore or possibly being put in dangerous ways.